It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
And I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And we're the Insiders. Chuck, Wisconsin has been on a roll lately with jobs announcements all over particularly in southeastern Wisconsin, big announcements like Microsoft, some announcements in Jefferson County, and we're hearing that there are more announcements coming. Was the governor going to get credit for all of those things? Maybe will that entice him to run for a third term?
I think that the governor and his WEDC and the people over there, but the governor will and should get credit for this. In particular, the one that's just stunning is the Microsoft. I mean, that's just crazy good news and contrasts so dramatically with the failure of Scott Walker and Donald Trump in southeastern Wisconsin with this, this whole big promise that they went so far in these promises to go around the state and buy buildings in Eau Claire and I think even La Crosse and Green Bay. And it was just like, this huge hype and nothing there. It was an empty bag. And now they're coming in with this amazing plan that really, bails up the town down there. I mean, this is the kind of thing that should turn the entire suburban area and around Racine and Kenosha blue, and Robin Voss ought to be knocked out by the Democrat. That's how dramatic this stuff is. And I do think they deserve a lot of credit. I'll tell you what, though, what you get credit for and don't in politics is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because, you would think that people want to blame Biden for inflation or whatever the increase in costs have, even though that happened around the world and there were a lot of things that had to do with that, supply chains and whatever, that had a lot to do with it that had nothing to do with anything that Biden did. And even if there is an impact, it's so minor. And yet he gets some blame for that by at least some of the electorate. This thing, whenever jobs come to an area, you get credit. That's why Tommy Thompson would go to a ribbon cutting for the creation of 2 new jobs. It didn't have to be 10. If it was 2, he would be there. And I think that the governor will get credit for that. And I think his WEDC will. And frankly, I think it's going to put a little egg on the face for Republicans. And I think that that's the way it will be played.
Well, I agree with you. The governors do generally get the credit. They try their hardest to make sure they get the credit for any good news that happens in the state, even if it's just the sun shining on certain days. Governors are out there trying to claim credit for it. But when it comes to jobs, I think the public does generally give the chief executive credit, even if it's been a team effort, even if it's been the result of multiple administrations or local government people pulling packages together, or it's the state government that Tony Evers heads up. Governors get the credit for all that stuff. That's almost always the way it's been here in Wisconsin. I assume that will continue forward. Whether the governor decides that that's a rationale for him to run for a third term, or it's a chance for him to maybe just take a victory lap and say goodbye, I don't know. But I think it's pretty clear that the governor will get credit for those. And I'm hoping that there's more announcements coming and the governor will get credit for those too, because Wisconsin deserves more of these high-paying, high-tech jobs of the future, which we seem to be suddenly getting.
I do think that, governors' decisions and presidents' decisions about whether they run for reelection and what they do hang on a lot of different things that are out there. I think that, Wisconsin is the kind of state where you can certainly run. It's at least a purple state. You're always going to be in good position. I frankly think we are gradually statewide becoming more blue. And I think that will continue. And I think that might be one of the saving graces this year for President Biden. But presidents pretty much do run for reelection, as we saw with Joe Biden, because you only get 2 terms. The governor here, Governor Evers, has 2 terms. And how long do you want to do that? Governor Evers is, maybe looking at this, and saying, I've had a great run here. I've set this up pretty well. Let's pass it off to the next person. And you leave, like you say, with a victory lap. And he would certainly get that. And I think people would say that he did really good things, and they will cite things like Microsoft. And even though Governor Evers himself will never do it, other people will be contrasting that with what happened in Southeast Wisconsin with Scott Walker and Donald Trump. In fact, I would not be surprised if you don't see some ads about that this year. in this election. So, it's a great thing. And I don't think there's anything that is more, what would you say, bipartisan or uniting to the extent we have any of that these days than job creation. Everybody knows that's good for all of us. It's good for Dems, it's good for Republicans, it's good for other businesses and ancillary people around there. It's good for our communities, whether it's Racine and Kenosha or even up to Milwaukee. It continues to create that 94 corridor that we want to build between Chicago and Milwaukee. This is a great thing. And I think Governor Evers is one of those people who would just say, even though he will get enormous credit, what a wonderful thing for Wisconsin. And I think we can all be proud of it. And I'm glad to hear Scott say that some Republicans can't get it out of their mouth, but Scott could, and I give him credit for that.
Let's hope for more good news ahead.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.